Is John Robinson, and he told me just to read from the back of the book, so that's he's a clinical psychologist with a second doctorate in ministry and an ordained interfaith minister and the author of 7 books on the psychological, spiritual, and mystical potentials of the new aging. Breakthrough is his first novel. And he's going to get up and talk a bit from it and read from it a little bit, and we'll have a little question and answer period afterwards, and then we're going to go downstairs and have the book signing. There will be books available for purchase down there. And I just want to please thank everybody for turning off their devices, whether they're 20th century or as much as we have 21st century. So if you'll make sure those are off, we'd like to welcome John Robinson.
I was going to stand and then my left knee started tweaking and twitching, and I thought, well, I think I'll sit. It's one of those realities of our age range, these various joint problems that happen. So anyway, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. I see all my favorite people out there, which makes me very happy. And now you're all my favorite people, so it's all good. Welcome to all of you. I want to especially thank Mostly Books, this wonderful independent bookstore in Gig Harbor, and the chapel on Echo Bay, and Holcher Promotions, where are they? And my wife Mala, who's pointing, for their undying support and encouragement of my work and my launch. So anyway, let me just dive right in. The audience for this book is the spiritually oriented baby boomer generation. 76 million baby boomers, 28% of the American population, began turning 65 in 2011, and at the rate of 10,000 people a day for 20 years, and they will live longer than any generation in history, creating a new developmental stage in the human life cycle. I find that astounding. I mean, really, it's utterly incredible. And boomers love spiritually oriented novels. You probably all remember Celestine Prophecy and Jonathan Livingston Seagull and The Alchemist and The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I think that we boomers are really primed for a good spiritually oriented aging novel. In fact, I don't think there's ever been a good spiritually oriented aging novel out there, so this is going to be the first one. And we boomers actually are also incredibly fascinated with conscious aging. You can almost underline that, conscious aging. Aging conferences and webinars and workshops and websites are popping up all over the place, and I've been presenting for the last 2 or 3 years at many of them. And the interest in conscious aging is just mushrooming everywhere. Which is really interesting, because we boomers at first want to conquer aging. We think we're just going to get out there with anti-aging creams and sex-activating hormones and plastic surgery and attitude and athletics and so forth. We're going to overwhelm aging, and it doesn't work. You don't conquer aging. But we are now... Is that too despairing? There's more, don't leave yet. However, of being transformed by this new developmental stage are incredible. I mean, that's really the shift, the paradigm shift here. And that's what this book is about. I feel like I'm already being transformed by aging, and I think you are too. It's a matter of noticing and getting on board this train. So, I started this novel 20 years ago, and then I put it down because I didn't know where to go with it. I didn't know what to write next. I just wasn't old enough. But then after researching the spirituality and the psychology and spirituality of aging over the last 5 years, and publishing 3 books in the process, I finally, and as my own 70th birthday is rapidly approaching, early next year, a little scary, I began to feel like I am old enough to finish the book. And so that's what I did. I dived back into this old manuscript of mine and brought it back to life. And then, because I was old enough and it was my own material I could finally write about, I created this novel. And what I like about this novel especially is that it summarizes everything in the previous books in a way that's fun, in a way that you can just take in by reading a good story and being surprised by the twists and the turns of it as it moves along. So all of this is happening, and we're just at the beginning of this incredible developmental stage here that we're just on the cusp of. So let's get into the story itself. I want to give you an overview of the book. and then do a reading, and then I'll answer questions, and then we'll go downstairs and drink wine and sign books. That's the enticement, by the way, going downstairs to drink wine and sign books. Here's a brief introduction. In the midst of a busy workday, Tom McLaughlin, husband, father, and clinical psychologist, meets a strange new patient named Paul, who not only complains of severe depression, but also reports a terrifying and recurring religious dream. Paul starts treatment with Dr. McLaughlin. As Paul's psychotherapy unfolds, he begins describing strange mystical experiences that rapidly transform his life and his problems. And then even more alarming, they begin to alter Tom's own state of mind, almost like a contagion. Tom, the psychologist, now starts to doubt his own sanity, and he has no clinical frame of reference for any of this that's going on. He wasn't trained to understand this. Well, needing space to regain perspective and hounded by this patient's avenging wife, Tom impulsively answers an ad for a Native American vision quest in the Nevada desert. It was a wild decision, right? Very impulsive. In the harsh and unforgiving isolation of the wilderness, Tom stumbles into his own mystical breakthrough. But his journey is hardly finished, for he is ill-prepared for the shocking events of aging that are now racing toward him. Deep in his own personal meltdown, Tom begins to realize that aging involves a profound deconstruction of self and identity, and at the same time, an initiation into a new state of consciousness that will transform his life and very possibly change the course of human evolution. So this is a book filled with big ideas and big possibilities. So that's a sketchy plot overview. I meant to whet your appetite for more. I'll read some excerpts from the book and that kind of give you a feeling of how this unfolds. Incidentally, one of my editors described the book as a novel of ideas, and I thought that was a kind of a nice description. And he's right. It's a book about the possibilities and the what-ifs of aging. You know, presenting ideas and questions that will hopefully stir your own journey through this time and your own exploration into the meaning and purpose of age, because it's something we each have to do. There's not a prescribed conclusion to this aging stuff. You have to live it. Also, as I read these selections, try to put yourself in the story. Be in the story. Try to be there and actually imagine what it is I'm describing. As you will see, the protagonist experiences a remarkable opening and transformation of his consciousness. And I'm hoping my readers will too, changing the way that we all approach this aging experience. So, are you ready? Buckle your seatbelts. That's kind of like Back to the Future, isn't it? Remember all that stuff that's coming out of Back to the Future? "3 a.m. The phone seemed to ring indefinitely before Tom climbed out of sleep and stumbled downstairs to his professional line. The answering machine stopped recording before Tom could see who it was. He pushed play. A call from Paul? Tom was startled to hear a confused and mumbled message about revelation and eternity, words repeated incoherently over and over. Oh, God, Tom thought, is this guy decompensating on me already? I wonder if I should call the psych unit and be sure they have a bed for him. Paul ended his rambling message saying he had to see Dr. McLaughlin in the morning. He'd be waiting at the office at 7 a.m., an hour before Tom's first regularly scheduled appointment. Tom looked at his wall clock. Oh, God, I hope I can get back to sleep, he whined to an empty room. What a way to start the day. Tom's remaining sleep was fitful in his early morning routine, a sleep-deprived blur. Shower, dress, hair, cereal, teeth, and out the door, all before the family was even up. Tom pulled into the empty parking lot. There he was, standing on the front landing, looking strangely upwards. Toward heaven, Tom joked cynically to himself. There was no outward sign of agitation or emotion, though Paul did look as if he had been waiting a long time. All night, Tom wondered out loud. Yet there was no pacing, no signs of impatience or paranoia. What on earth is going on here, Tom wondered. Tom greeted Paul and quickly disarmed the security system, let them into the building and into his office. Paul quietly took his seat. Paul, what's happening? Are you okay? Dr. McLaughlin Everything's changed. Paul began softly. It started around midnight. Jesus came to me again in my dream. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I walked outside into the starry night. The first thing I noticed was the light. Soft but bright. It was everywhere, even in the dark. I know that sounds crazy. There was no moon and the street light by our house is broken, but I still saw everything. Each leaf, pebble, bush, tree was lit up like Christmas lights. It was so beautiful, like I was in a whole other world. I thought I was still dreaming, but this was way too clear and vivid for a dream. And there's more. You know how you can sense another person or an animal before you see them? There was no one around, but I felt surrounded by something alive. At first I was scared. I felt like the presence of something huge, but I sensed it was completely safe and full of love. It was around and in everything. Then I realized it was the light. The light was conscious and alive. Its presence was everywhere, everywhere. Things kept changing. Suddenly there was no future and no past. Time had stopped. My mind opened up like a huge book. Whatever questions I had were instantly answered by this presence, and all that mattered was this light around me. It knew me, knew everything I'd gone through, knew every day of my life, all my pain, questions and troubles, and none of that had any bearing. It loved me anyway. My whole life made perfect sense in a way I can't explain now, but I knew that no matter what happened, I had nothing to fear, not even death. I was surrounded by this love. I was going to be okay. Then it went even further. I melted into this presence. It was the greatest peace I had ever known. Maybe a minute, maybe eternity. For that instant, there wasn't any me anymore. It's just impossible to explain. And then, the next thing I knew, it was over. I looked around, dazed. The light had returned to normal, but everything still looked so beautiful. I know it sounds crazy, but all I could do was fall on my knees and cry. I kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, over and over. And when my emotions finally settled, I lay down on the street and looked up at the heavens. I was so happy. Anyway, that's what happened. I had to tell someone. I had to tell you. Tom could not think of a single word to say. He could not even move. Mesmerized by Paul's astonishing account, he sat in the chair like a dead weight. It was as if his mind, too, had stopped. None of this was even remotely familiar from his clinical training. He had to rouse himself. Trying at last to act like a psychologist, Tom cleared his throat, but still no words came. Sensing Dr. McLaughlin's struggle, Paul resumed his soliloquy, filling in more details and repeating his wonderment and gratitude. Finally, as the morning sun poured through the office's mahogany shutters, Paul concluded, when I called you, I was still high. I was beyond myself. Even now, it has not really left me, this feeling of presence, like an ocean of love holding me, and everything in its deep peace. I can sense it. I am in it. Don't you see? Don't you see God never left the world? God is the world. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's no ugliness or sin. Heaven is here. We're in it. I'm no longer afraid of death, for I know now that death is just the doorway into this total love. Tom sat speechless, motionless, dumbstruck. He had not a single reasonable thing to say. Tried to talk. Nothing. Nothing. There were no words. He was mute. Paul's response was merely to sit silently in his strangely altered state. He observed Tom's immobilization, but did not try to help him. Though Paul felt genuine compassion for his doctor's bewilderment, it didn't really matter. It was enough now just to be alive. I've returned to Eden, Paul mused aloud to himself. I've been given a new life. The session ended anticlimactically. Paul simply got up, said goodbye, and started to leave. His movement broke Tom's transfixed state enough for him to ask, well, will you come back? Do you want another appointment? I think we should discuss this some more. God, what lame statements, he thought to himself. But he couldn't let Paul go without some follow-up. If you like, I'll be back next week, same time. With that simple promise, Paul walked quietly from the office, leaving behind some of the peace he had found in the night. Tom did not move again until his next client, who had now been waiting nearly 20 minutes, knocked impatiently on the office door. So that's the beginning, or not the beginning, but that's part of Tom's initiation into this new, strange state of consciousness. So everything is going wrong in his life after this. Things are falling apart. He's being investigated. People are accusing him of all sorts of things. It's like your typical novel. Everything falls apart. So he finds this brochure on his desk that's been there for a long time in a basket marked "Read Later." And in desperation, he said, took a last-minute opening and jumped on an airplane to Las Vegas and went out into the desert to this Native American vision quest. He thought he was just going to have a little time to think. The early morning was still cold. Tom hiked carefully, his backpack heavy with bedroll, sleeping bag, warm clothes, his personal journal, and 3 one-gallon water jugs tied to the frame. Trekking over loose rocks and dry riverbeds, Tom stumbled frequently, unaccustomed to the top-heavy weight of his pack. His legs grew wobbly as he traversed the nearly 3 miles to the site he had picked at the base of a rocky butte. Tom was now truly alone. The solo quest had begun. When he reached his campsite, Tom blessed it with an offering of tobacco and cornmeal as Sam had instructed, sprinkling it in the 4 directions: east to the beginning of life, south to the body, emotions, north to the elders, ancestors, and their wisdom, and west to the end of life's journey. He wasn't sure how he felt about all these Native American rituals and didn't really know much about prayer, but performed them with sincerity. Tying his tarp between a large boulder and his backpack, Tom set up camp and waited. The sun climbed into the sky with infinite slowness, finally stopping to glare down at him from directly above. Now Tom could not be sure that the sun was moving at all. Boredom, heat, wind, insects, hunger, wind, loneliness, boredom, thirst, water, hunger, wind, frustration, heat, heat, heat. He meditated, prayed, wrote in his journal, sipped water to quell hunger pangs, walked around unexpectedly. He stripped off his clothes and stood naked in the elements, the wind, sun, and air bathing his body, baptizing him. Time stretched until it seemed to break, and there was no time left at all. Had he entered some other dimension of time and reality? He dressed and sat quietly on the sleeping bag. The first day finally ended. Tom didn't think much had really been accomplished. The sun, which now stared down at him with little personal interest, sank rapidly over the mountains to the west. Tom moved his sleeping bag from his tarp shelter out under the night sky. Fear crept into the bag with him. Were there predatory animals at night? Night spirits? Nightmares? He had never been so alone and isolated in his life. Curling into a ball, Tom prayed to whoever God was for protection, insight, and comfort. Watching shooting stars and satellites play through the Milky Way, he eventually fell asleep. Dawn. He was learning to love the sunrise. It began with the barest hint of light over the dark eastern ridge and then gradually spread its glow across a perfectly azure sky to awaken the world. He greeted the sun as a friend now, welcoming its warmth and light. Reflecting on these thoughts, Tom noticed how his consciousness was changing. It felt like the first day of creation. And he was beginning to relate to the earth and sky, sun and moon, weather, plants and animals, as if they were alive, sentient beings in communication with each other. He spoke to them, asked them questions, shared his feelings, prayed for their blessings on his day. Everything had a kind of meaning and message, though he couldn't tell if it came from them or him. The wind said, "Be still, watch." The birds said, "Wake up, pay attention." The ground said, "You are resting on the mother." It was comforting, puzzling, intriguing. Wow, he thought. This different consciousness is just below the surface in us, hidden by the distractions of modern life. It comes out like stars at night when the glaring lights of civilization are absent. Where is this going, he wondered. The second day grew hotter and Tom's hunger pains more insistent. For a moment he realized he was drinking water too fast if he continued at this rate. For over an hour, all he could think about was eating, remembering all the tastes of the foods he loved and some that surprised him. French toast, Diet Coke, scrambled eggs, Thanksgiving stuffing, coffee, BLTs. Finally, he stopped himself. This was torture, and it was only the second day. Worst time had not only stopped, it was taking forever, which was one of the strangest thoughts he'd had so far. Needing to do something, Tom began to build the prescribed medicine wheel. Picking rocks of all sizes, he made a large circle with an opening to enter and exit. In it, he placed other rocks to symbolize the important people in his life, past and present. His parents, grandparents, ancestors, children, wife, future unborn grandchildren. He started thinking then about his entire life. Childhood disappointments, the death of his father, all the things he hadn't said to his father and grandmother, and how much he loved Ronnie, and what he wanted for each child, regrets he hadn't done enough for his family, and contemplation of his own shortening future. As the sun set each day, so his life would set someday, and he would leave his children and this world. This was the autumn of his life. Wind picked up. The wind picked up as it often did in the afternoon, seeming to know and express his mood. Tom began to cry and was surprised to hear himself sobbing for his father. Where are you, Dad? I need you. You would understand what I'm going through. Then it was over. The sorrow left, the wind died down, and there was only the present, barren landscape, timeless, forever, impersonal, mystical. None of this made sense. It didn't need to. Thoughts came and went in disordered sequences, sucked away by the vast desert vacuum. More strange thoughts. Why am I alive? Why are we here? Where is God? In this emptying, Tom realized that what he thought he knew consisted merely of beliefs overlaid on the timelessness of this new consciousness. But beliefs were not innocent. They carried the power to start wars, create poverty, maintain prejudice, even religious beliefs. Why were we so invested in beliefs that caused so much pain, he wondered. No longer hungry, and with more energy than he would have expected on a fast, Tom hiked to the top of the butte behind his campsite. Vigorous movement felt good, purposeful, alive, and the summit, perhaps only 60 feet high, provided a panoramic vision of the area. But there was something closer. Perfect, tiny, delicate, colorful wildflowers hidden from the wind in crevices everywhere. Tom thought, look how they grow in such beauty and joyous profusion with no hope of ever being seen, no ego at all. They grow for the love of God. Now, that's an unusual thought. We too grow for the love of God. Now, that thought felt even stranger. Somehow Tom knew he was no longer himself. He had entered an altered state of consciousness. Feeling braver, he asked aloud, what is consciousness? Where is it? Who is it? The answer moved into his awareness as easily as water into a sponge. It is God. Consciousness is God. Personal consciousness is simply a limited state of this consciousness. With this realization, the landscape around Tom filled with consciousness. He sensed it directly, sensed it was awake and aware of him and aware of him sensing it. He thought, the world is alive. This is what Paul's been talking about. Consciousness is not just in me, I am in it, and it is everywhere. So, how is that feeling to people?
I want you to keep going.
I have one more section if you can sit here, if you're not bored.
I'm great.
How many people vote for one more? Okay, well, I know this is, I hope this is not too boring. Anyway, the years pass, Tom ages, and then a new wave of changes shatters his life, as it will for all of us. A heart attack with terrifying complications happens to him. He is forced into premature retirement. And this is where he's at. The kids were gone, his career was gone, his community of therapists was gone. Everyone went on with business as usual except Tom. But he was not totally bereft of friendship. In addition to Ronnie's steady support and Clarence's spiritual friendship, the other bright light in Tom's life was his friend Rich, an 85-year-old retired psychologist. Thin white hair, stubbly goatee, and short stature like a gnome, he joked. Rich sported a silver cane for balance and moved his arthritic joints carefully. Typically sanguine, he spoke with a vaguely Massachusetts accent and always a twinkle in his eyes. Rich was a delight to know, and he had come to love his younger protege. They met every week for coffee and talked about their lives. Their conversations combated the professional black hole sucking the light from Tom's world. God, Rich, I feel so lost. Tom began one Wednesday morning over coffee. The smell of French roast permeated the small cafe, its counters full of colorful pastries, its clerks friendly and efficient. But the cheeriness of the scene failed to penetrate Tom's dark mood. I feel like I'm disappearing. My identity, my roles in family and community, my place in the world, who am I now? I feel like I don't exist. Rich smiled sympathetically, wiped a crumb from his goatee, and sat up straighter in his seat and said, Tom, though you started earlier than most, what you're describing is the aging experience. I've been living its changing landscapes for 2 decades. You see, Tom, with retirement, your world empties of the structure and connections that made up your middle years, like work, professional friendships, kids' activities. You fall into a desert of time with vast stretches and nothing to do. This void secretly terrifies most men and many women, so they keep working as long as they can or desperately to keep busy in retirement. You didn't get to choose, but you are here anyway. But understand that this life change, what some jokingly call menopause, eventually affects everyone. But why did this horrible trauma happen to me? I didn't just retire, I got blasted out of my life. I keep thinking it must have some kind of spiritual meaning or significance. Well, I agree that you were blasted out rather unceremoniously, but your heart attack and career loss are part of a larger process that comes with aging. You have entered into a new stage of the life journey, a part where the familiar you gets taken apart and gradually or suddenly dissolves. It's going to happen sooner or later. In the aging process, we give up who and what we were. But I believe aging also represents a purposeful stage of life, inviting us into an entirely new dimension of consciousness, especially now with our increased longevity. Well, this remark caught Tom's attention. He knew that people were living considerably longer than ever before, 1 or 2 decades longer, and he knew that difficult things would happen in the aging experience, health crises, retirement losses, deaths of parents, friends, and loved ones, grown children with little time for parents, and eventually your own physical decline. But what if these losses were part of something bigger? He was stunned. Then vaguely he began to sense that this crisis might indeed be part of something larger, something to do with the next expansion of mystical consciousness. Okay, that helps. But still, who am I now? I feel as if I've died. I'm still here, but I'm not. I feel like an awareness without an ego. One of the most profound experiences of aging, Rich resumed, is this loss of the familiar self, the identity you've maintained for years. It took me years to come to terms with it. Who you think you are no longer exists. Dr. McLaughlin, breadwinner, professional, father of small children. Even your body is different, and God knows we don't look anything like we used to. Have you seen a photo of yourself recently? They still freak me out. Who is that old man in the picture? Yet I don't feel old, of course, until I stand up and walk, but even then I'm still the same inside. Consciousness doesn't change. It's ageless, only its contents change. They suddenly fall away like leaves in autumn. Tom sat still. He stroked his beard, took a bite of his muffin, sip of coffee. This was huge. What does it mean to not exist? He remembered his earlier conversations with God. What had he understood? Yes, that consciousness does not belong to you, rather that you are in it. And more to the point, that the familiar you merely consists of a complex of thoughts, essentially a fiction? Of course, said Rich. So Tom stumbled onward, looking for some kind of solid ground. When identity disappears, what's left, he asked. Consciousness? Yes, said Rich, or more accurately, divine consciousness. This is the next step in the evolution of human consciousness. Age itself cooperates, by dismantling the whole project of you. This is mystical consciousness 2.0, he laughed, comparing it to a new computer operating system. What you experienced in the desert intensifies greatly in aging, removing the filters of identity and belief. Like smudges on a car windshield, you disappear into the infinite consciousness of divinity. The task of aging is to transform everything in this amazing consciousness.
So John, how do you do that without glasses?
Well, you just... Oh, I thought you were talking about how do you do consciousness without glasses. That's really easy. Just stop thinking. Well, you know, here's the secret that I tell everybody. I actually have one eye that's nearsighted and one eye that's farsighted, so I still don't use glasses. It's a wonderful aberration of my physiology. So I hope that I have stirred your curiosity about what Tom undergoes and what he experiences about life, spirituality, and aging. And incidentally, it's all fairly solidly grounded on our evolving understanding of the new aging and on a large collection of mystical experiences I have collected over the years, including my own. And Tom's not done yet because there's another mystery to solve and another stage to reach, and you'll understand that as you get through Breakthrough. So this is a good book for those questioning the meaning and purpose of age, and anyone you know who's getting on in years without some kind of positive philosophy about life. So if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff and me, go to my website, johnrobinson.org. Email me your reaction to your book. I'd love to hear your reactions. Stay in touch. And if you like the book, please write stuff on Amazon about it. That's one of those keys that you have to turn to get books to go on Goodreads and stuff. I think this book can change the way we understand aging, and with the transformation of boomers into enlightened elders, perhaps a new kind of aging may even change the world. We are on the crest of something amazing. So thank you. Thank you so much. Who wants to go downstairs and have a glass of wine and some brandy? Oh yes, questions. Sorry. Yes. Talk to me. Any questions? Yes.
This is really interesting to me because I find that I think the globe, the planet, is going through a transformation such as this. And now I'm kind of having a different perspective of it, in that you're saying there's this whole wave of our population, at least the United States, Western population, maybe Japan as well, are aging. And so it's kind of supporting that whole transformation that's going on, that's necessary,
yes,
you know, on the planet. So that's a really interesting thing to think about.
It's an amazing time.
As you're going through that developmental stage, it's driving or help supporting.
The whole culture is entering a new age,
right,
a new stage for itself. It's interesting then that older countries are much less likely to start wars than younger countries. I mean, countries with younger populations. And so as our populations in the West get older and older, we're much less likely to, and no democracy has ever attacked another democracy. So there's some positive things happening as we all grow more mature and more aware of ourselves. And if we can do this in this kind of more centered awareness of our own deep being, where the deepest part of our being is so filled with love and consciousness and presence that we offer the world and the young people a whole different way to be. And not that we should go out and fix things, because that's their job, but we can hold the consciousness and hold the space. I think we have a wonderful place to be now in the world.
I also think the opposite end. I think the younger children that are coming in now also have a tremendous thing to offer.
I think so,
and so
too.
I think that bridging of those
Yes,
two ends of the age,
yeah,
you know.
our kids and our grandkids are so amazing and so competent, and they already have so many interesting new ideas, and this whole computer generation, and as they're wiring their brains to computers, who knows what's going to happen. Other questions?
John, when I'm listening to you, what I hear is somebody, not sure how to put it, is somebody in the process of making and remaking the primordial myth.
Yes, I think so.
And trying to fashion, because many of the ideas that you've just read through are by no means new. They're very old.
Sure, this is...
At least in the culture that I'm aware of. have a history, but you seem to be struggling, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but struggling in the sense of working something, needing
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
you know, like a huge ball of dough or
I think
something.
we do see that this whole human enterprise has evolved. I mean, I think we started off much more as indigenous peoples in a mystical kind of consciousness, where we were much more one with things, because that's where our survival lay. And then as we began to develop, that's right hemisphere stuff, right cerebral hemisphere. The left cerebral hemisphere came online, the survival value of language became incredible. And so we have become so left hemisphere dominant. All we see in the world is what we think. We no longer are seeing the world itself. And the mystics from across time and history and era have said that really when you stop thinking and really wake up, the Eden hasn't left. The divine world is still here. So we need to bring this together. Language and thought are incredibly important, but disconnected from soul, disconnected from a deep kind of spiritual being, they just run rampant. They go crazy. They do terrible things. We need to balance the two. And I think that's what our kids are getting closer to doing. And I think if we can hold the consciousness frame and they can hold the technology and new ideas frame, we then.
But what your character was saying, I think, was having to do with the restructuring of knowing.
Yes.
How do we know? What do we know? What don't we know? How can I make sense of what I think?
Yeah.
Or no longer,
Right.
my thinking no longer creates
Yeah.
a sense of meaning.
It's a paradigm shift of huge
It's
proportions.
really a desertion.
Yeah, it's a surrender of a bunch of old models that served us for so
Right.
long. It's almost like moving from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics. I mean,
Right.
they have a place, but we're much more than that. Yeah. Yeah, Carl.
Yes. Was there a particular point of clarity or stimulus that brought about the idea and the meat of this book? And then was it mostly from the psychology side or the theology side?
Well, that's a complicated question. I think I've been a mystic all my life. So, but I think in my family, our religion was science and psychoanalysis, so there wasn't much room for a mystic. So I went into psychology because I thought that really was a good place to ask the questions I had in mind. You know, what's the purpose of life? Why do people do what they do to each other? But then over the years, you know, and psychology, and when I first started, was really very hostile towards spirituality. Freud thought of it just a neurosis, basically. But as times have changed, and as I changed and grew, I've been trying to blend these two things, this psychology and spirituality, and mysticism. Mysticism really is the first-hand experience of the ultimate reality. So if anything, it's more like I've always known this, and I've been trying to figure out how to have it happen. And then what I began to realize that in aging, because we get older and all of our identity, time, and story stuff begins to fall away. Imagine it like a jigsaw puzzle of your life on the wall as you, and you're looking at it, and the pieces start falling away, you know, and more pieces fall away. But wait, spoiler alert, God shines through the spaces.
No.
So what happens is that every one of these ideas was a lens that blocks you from this experience of ultimate reality. And when the lens falls away and you really wake up to what is, you say, oh my God, this is amazing, and I was here all the time. So it's really been a matter of coming home. And I think the universal story is, you know, we grow up in this mystical consciousness, we get seduced by the culture and its concepts and beliefs and the pressure to educate and so forth. We go far away from home, and then when we're old and we start dropping all these things away, we start coming home to who we really are.
It's a second childhood.
Yeah, it is a second childhood, where you blend innocence with wisdom. So it's not just a purely second childhood, but you have the both.
I just wanted to say, in the midst of all these huge ideas and thoughts, these thoughts are carried along in the framework in this book of a really intriguing story. So
Thank you.
it's fed to you in a very, very interesting manner.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions before you can always ask more questions downstairs. Wine is calling. Brownies are calling.
Wine and cookies.
Wine and cookies.